Rishi, welcome to the Herd Has Spoken. It's great to have you on today.
Hi, Brad. Nice to see you
So
and hear
I've
you.
yeah, I've got to start by asking you, how are you doing, right? We're in the middle of a recession, a global pandemic, tons of protests in the streets. And oh, by the way, you run a number of retail stores, and we all know that retail's been hit, really bad recently. So how are you?
Not as bad as airlines and hotels, but yes, we're up there. Uh, I'm healthy and family's healthy and surviving quarantine and homeschool, and so I think to put it all in perspective, I'm much better than many people out there, and so I really like to take it in that lens. But yeah, man, business is hard. This really exposes that, and really forces you to go back to your roots. Sales, if sales is what it was, or customer service if that's what it was, or I mean, I would argue they are the same thing and all part and parcel, right? But so yeah, hanging in there is my go-to answer. Hope everybody's hanging in there out there, but we're surviving, and I think it's for us, it's like, yeah, we got to figure out a way to come out on the other side of this, in 12 to 18 months or whenever the world kind of opens back up fully. I don't know what company will be or what everything will look like at that time, but hopefully we'll be around.
For sure. So I want to dig into two words that you mentioned, and that's roots and family. So I know those are two things that are really, really important to you. So tell us a little bit about your roots and your family.
For sure. So my name may have been a giveaway on it, but my parents are from India. They moved from India to Indiana, where I mean, for obvious reasons,
For
so
sure, for
similar,
sure.
so similar, obviously, right?
And I've
No,
never
my
known
dad
why
was
Arkansas is said Arkansas as opposed to Kansas when you put
Arkansas.
an AR in front of it. Never
Yeah,
understood that.
yeah, I agree. The India, nah, really pulled my parents in. No, my dad was a chemist and came to Purdue, went to Purdue for his postdoc, and then eventually stayed there to be a professor. And my brother and I were both born in West Lafayette, Indiana, and when we were 8, moved to Okemos, right outside East Lansing, which you know all too well. And then I went to school in Ann Arbor, and I had a brief stint living in Berkeley, California. So I've literally only ever lived in college towns. So I'm a college town kid. That's where I feel the most comfortable. As I will tell anyone, it's the true fountain of youth. Just live in a college town, man. That's the way to feel young. So yeah, so grew up in Indiana. My dad was a professor of chemical engineering, both at Purdue and then at Michigan State, and so I was a prototypical academics kid. Definitely uh, overachiever type. Wanted to take APs and do really well, be considered one of the smartest kids in school. I thought I was going to be a professor like my dad, and as I think both culturally that was important, and then there was just an internal pressure, to quote unquote succeed and do that myself. So that was my path, and so I went through high school and then wanted to go to U of M and study chemical engineering, University of Michigan. And the reason not Michigan State, where my father was a professor, was because I just couldn't imagine myself in his like classes or anything like that. I was like, oh, I don't want to be, Dr. Narayan's kid or something like that.
Right.
Fast forward to 2 years later, when I realized that what an idiot I was. Of course, I should have like been in my dad's classes. Like any advantage I could have had in school and college, course notes, like nepotism, I would have taken it all because it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I was like, what an idiot. Of course, leg up, man, take it. So no, I was glad with my choice. It was a good distance away, but still close enough to home. And went to UVM to be an engineer.
That worked out
That's
really well,
not,
huh?
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as you allude to, I went and realized very quickly that I didn't really want to be an engineer. I worked in my dad's lab in high school, and I really loved it. I thought it was really cool, and I thought the things he did was cool. And it was only sitting in like intro to thermodynamics my sophomore year that I was like, what is this? This is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. And I slowly began to realize that what I loved was entrepreneurship. My dad was an entrepreneur. He licensed in technologies back to himself and created businesses. And I just thought that was chemical engineering. Little did I know that was what he did. And that's not really, that was just a facet, a very small facet of chemical engineering. So um, I was lucky enough to stumble into t-shirts along the way in college through a chance encounter with a tow truck driver. I busted up Ford Probe GT Turbo and a couple run-ins with breaking down and this jack of all trades type tow truck driver who used to print t-shirts in town. So my partner Ryan Gregg and I, we were, we were easily distracted from our studies. Let's just put it that way. And so if there was something out there, we were going to do it. I was in like student government and this and that, and like anything else I could take you do to like be busy. And we ended up deciding to take this guy out to dinner, offer to buy all of his t-shirt equipment, old t-shirt equipment, and start a t-shirt company. And that's what we did. And I'll fast forward 20 years, 19 years, and still printing t-shirts to this day, and still enjoying it.
I mean, I love your story so much because it talks about hard work and dumb luck and being willing to just take a chance and combining it all together.
A
And
lot of dumb luck.
yeah, and that's true. And I've also found, and I'd be interested in your take on this, is that I certainly believe the harder you work, the luckier you get.
I agree. I agree, but I also feel like there are a lot of hard workers out there that didn't get lucky, for sure. I think hard work is a subset to a lot of a lot of us. Like we believe and we are hard workers. I think it's actually the more you open yourself up to opportunities and potential chance of failure, the luckier you get. And maybe it's not luck, it's just that like some of them hit. But when you close down and you don't open yourself up to a lot of opportunities, you don't feel as lucky, but you also don't feel the ups and downs, so to speak. So I think it really there's a training to like just take a chance at stuff, and maybe throw your ego aside, which is hard to do. Throw maybe any savings aside. These are difficult things, and I remember like when we started the company, I started at a very early age, sophomore in college. Just gotta get a lot of kudos for being so young. Oh, wow, you're running a business, which in college was really like two guys like having a good time slinging shirts and running all over campus. It didn't really become a real business till later on, but we got a lot of kudos for that. And honestly, I feel bad now because like it was easy then. I had no risk, no responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If it all went up in flames, we could have moved on and been fine. uh, the real risk and responsibility would be with a mortgage and responsibilities and a partner, a spouse, kids, a life, people to take care of. Like when you risk it, then that's trickier. That's a much difficult proposition. So I don't think it's something where it's like, oh, how you got to open yourself up to opportunities. That's a timing thing. That's a are you in the right place thing, and hopefully you are able to put yourself in a position to do that. And sometimes sheer hard luck and sheer will can get you there.
So yeah, I want to talk about the present time and then go back to that experience that you had in college. So now, undergrad printing, custom T-shirt manufacturer, and retail stores in a whole bunch of college stores. You've got over 250 employees. Is that about right?
It was. It's fluctuating in these days, but yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fair enough with the retail.
yeah. We'll talk about all things in end of 2019 things. But yes, hopefully again back up to 250. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So 250 employees ish. You're in a number of different college towns. You've also started an angel investment group. You own a soccer club, the AFC Ann Arbor. and you're certainly still running this business. So you're a busy man. Oh, by the way, you're also teaching classes at the University of Michigan on entrepreneurship. And you mentioned something that I think is really important. You said, hey, like being able to get over your ego and get over the opportunity of failure and the fact that frankly you will fail. So how did you learn that? Right? I mean, some of it might have been dumb luck, but I feel like for so many people that are listening to this, there's that one thing that they've been thinking about doing for a really
Yeah.
long time, and something is standing in their way. So
Yeah.
how did you get over it that very first time? And what was it that was standing in your way?
So I'll tell you about the first time, but I'll also tell you like it isn't a past tense. It isn't how did you get over it and never had to get over it again. I have to get over it every single time. So I'll tell you about the first time and then I'll tell you about the last time. So the first, I think getting over it the first time for me was I've talked about this before, but basically it was understanding that I was not going to be at the top of my class in at U of M in chemical engineering, that I wasn't into it as much as maybe others were, and that that wasn't going to be my path. I could take classes and do okay, and graduate and get the degree, but that wasn't going to be what I wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to learn what I wanted to do while I was in school, by opening myself up to opportunities. But many friends, many people that you and I both know only learn what they want to do after they graduate and take a
Right.
career in what they think they're supposed to do, and then only learn that
Get it wrong.
3 years down the line, right? They get it wrong. I was lucky to have gotten it right. But I do think that the way that I did it the first time around was by just saying like I can juggle a lot of things, and that's not necessarily always true, but it came from this idea that like I stopped defining success as getting an A or being at the top of my class, even though that's how I was raised to be. In hindsight, retrospect, I think a lot of that was my own internal pressure I put on. Came from cultural, came from my peers, came from whatever it might be. But the majority of it was internal pressure I put on myself. And once I kind of made that realization, got over that, had something else to kind of put my chips into a little bit. It wasn't just going to be school. I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing as well, and I want to be good at that. And now, I started to develop this kind of strategy at that time of the fast B, which is basically like, you don't need the A, get to the fast B, because in real life, nobody cares if you got the A. They just care if you got there, and did you get there in time,
For
essentially.
sure. Thanks, Coach
And
Powers. Good lesson.
yeah, thanks, Coach Powers. That's right. That's right. Thanks, Coach Powers. Great lesson. And so so that was the first time. But here's the thing: is like I can preach about that all day long. But uh, I went to start a podcast a year ago, and I had been talking about it for 3 years. And honestly, it was like, well, how big is it going to be, and like how successful am I going to be at it, and I essentially like talked myself out of it. I was like, well, but if I don't have a lot of listens, then what are people going to think about it? And I just like, I don't know what day it was. I don't know when it happened. It may very well could be after some of the things that we talked about, ourselves, you and I. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm preaching and talking and teaching kids about taking a chance and what's the definition of success. And here I am being like, I'm not going to do this because I'm worried about success. And
Right.
is it worth my time? It's like, yeah, it may not be worth your time, but you've been talking about it for years. You're really into it. Give it a shot, give it a go. And that was really that. And that was 2 years ago. And after I would, have been well on my career. So I truly do think it's not a thing that you get over the hurdle and you're done. It's you have to do it again and again. And startups the same way. You have to start a business every 3 to 5 years, because you lose those skills, you lose the ability to like put it all out there. It goes away. I think you have to like keep honing it.
I think in some ways it's actually harder once
Oh
you've
yeah.
achieved some success because
Oh yeah.
you have this expectation of the results, but success doesn't come from previous successes. Sure, you learn some things along the way, but anytime you're doing something new, there's a whole lot of effort. There's a learning curve. And oh, by the way, there's like your expectations as you get older go
Yeah.
higher and higher and higher. And I'm curious, how do you how do you overcome, how do you overcome that, right? Or how did you overcome that, right? Because in college it was kind of like you had the serendipity moment of this tow truck driver, which
Yeah.
was sort of a nice kick in the ass for you to actually start this t-shirt company. And you probably didn't have that, podcast, run in where suddenly you're talking with Tim Ferriss on the
Yeah. Right.
subway,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
No, I didn't have the golden goose guest that was gonna like drive me to, 100 million listeners or anything like that for sure. I think that I actually think that part of it was rooted in the dichotomy between, say, chemical engineering and printing t-shirts. So at the time when we started that business, there like, you know, it wasn't, you weren't raising money by and large, unless you had like, you amazingly had developed some amazing technology or something like that at a young age, but you weren't creating apps. There wasn't the tech infrastructure and you weren't really raising money. Most people that were starting businesses were selling something, or providing a service, but essentially it was all sales of some sort, advertising, websites, whatever it might be.
sure.
And I had so much of my own self-worth and ego kind of in this idea that I was an engineer, a chemical engineer, not even that was a difficult major, and I was taking a difficult, course, and um, that was where a lot of my pride was. And to then kind of go into this world of like, yeah, but printing t-shirts, which for a while, like I didn't even want to own up to. I kind of put it on the side. It was like, I just print, I do this fun thing on the side, but I'm an engineer, like that's what I do. I'm a grad student, still that's what I do. But because they were so far apart in my mind, I don't believe that anymore, but because they at that
Right.
time they were so far apart, that was the like kind of humbling for me to some degree, right? At that certain point, I graduated from grad school, couldn't say I was a student anymore. So when someone asked what I did, I had to basically say, this is what I do. I print t-shirts. And to this day, I like to start, like, if people ask me what I do, I my preferred answer is to say I print t-shirts. And then if the conversation goes somewhere from there, I can tell them like how and why in my story, and what my company does. But I usually put the ball in the other person's court if that's where they want to go. Because I want to make sure that I'm still good with the fact that if at by and large at the end of the day, if you're like, hey, cool, walk away, and you think, oh, Rishi, he prints t-shirts, that's good with me. I'm good with that.
One of the things I think is pretty interesting here that I have never talked with you about is you started underground printing when you were an undergrad. Was it your sophomore year?
Yeah, software. It was technically called A1 screen printing at the time because
Phone
A1
book.
was first in the phone book. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So you start this business after starting another business, building lofts inside of dorms,
Yep.
and you've now been working at this for 3 years, right? You worked for it through your sophomore year, your junior
Yep.
year, and your senior year. So you're growing this t-shirt business, and at that point, you kind of know this is what you want to do, but you decide to get a master's degree, which is interesting, right? Because a lot of the people that we talk with, it's like you can't hedge. If
Mm,
you want to go after something as a startup, sure, you can do the side hustle if you have another job. But there comes a moment of truth where you've got to quit your job and you're either going to
yeah.
find out you can do it or you can't. And I'm curious here, what made you decide to continue down the academic pursuit? Was that more of an identity thing where you weren't ready to sort of identify as a t-shirt
Yeah.
guy?
It was what I thought I should be, what my definition of success was, what I thought my path was supposed to be, and it was supposed to be rooted in academics, and it was supposed to potentially be, this success level. Um, I wasn't ready for that, and I still needed to be able to tell people I was doing. There was a lot of pride in being able to say I was getting my master's in chemical engineering.
Was that coming from
I
your
would be lying.
family?
I think it was coming from me, and it was rooted within like the success of my family and what my dad had done, and that I took a lot of pride in that. Took a
Uh,
lot of pride in that. Still
Absolutely.
do, and the I think I've told you this, but like to some degree, like why am I teaching at U of M? Is because that's kind of me paying homage to my dad. Like that's something I got to tell him I was doing, and now I do it for me. But yeah, that was a factor, right? So, um, I think that I really needed to learn that lesson. So I needed to be able to tell people about that. And then looking back on it, look, it really did teach me a lesson about hedging. I think that I'm a believer in hedging. I'm not a believer in taking a big bet and then going all in. I think when you take other people's money, then you have to go all in. Yeah, it's hard to convince someone that you can like hedge three things when you've taken
Right.
$1 million or something like that.
Yeah.
But when you're playing with house money, so to speak, or little friends and family or whatever, then yeah, why not wait until you see if you've gone to the tipping point? Why not hit that level? It doesn't always work out that way, but when you can do it, I'm an advocate in that, because that is the fast B, and that is that kind of mentality. And so it provided me a two more years of runway to see whether this was the thing that we were going to do. And to be completely honest, the first year and a half, like we were figuring it out, and we were going at our own pace, and that was cool, right? So like nowadays, I think, and like that's not how business gets started. But then it was a side gig, it was a side hustle. We sold like, we didn't sell hundreds of jobs that first year. We sold like 10 jobs the first, 15
Right.
jobs, whatever it was.
Right.
We learned hard lessons about cash flow and collections and payables and all of that stuff, and it just came in a small dose, and then it went from there. So it was definitely an identity thing, but in hindsight, it helped develop and frame like my beliefs in hedging and risk taking. That I don't believe that entrepreneurship is risk taking. I think it's smart hedges, smart bets, and making the right decision more often than not.
And for you, I'm asking you to put your investor hat on, and I'd like to come back to this in just a minute, why you've decided to become an investor. But what makes for a good investment, right? Like what makes for a good risk versus return ratio where you're not taking that risk, so to speak, but you're actually
Yeah.
making a smart investment.
I look, that's still an area I'm learning, like all like all areas. I would say I learned a very interesting lesson when it comes to investments pretty early on, where there was a company that we were pretty enamored with, and I'll leave all the names out of it. But there was a company we were pretty enamored with, was really doing really well, was in a space I knew really well, and it was going really well. The founder, we were lukewarm on, but we loved the company and thought he had basically just stumbled into something that was gold.
Right.
And we thought, okay, it's all right, because he can take our criticism and we can guide him. Like, this business is great. He's all right, but this business is great. We bet on the horse and not the
Horse.
jockey. And a couple years later, that turned disastrous for me. And a couple years after that, company tanked. And it was a hard lesson for me, but a good one about, of course it's cliche. Of course you bet on the person and not that, but no, but when it's really attractive, when the horse is really, really gonna win, like you really have a feeling about that horse, and the jockey you don't know about, like it's tempting. Every single time it's tempting. And that was a good lesson to learn. It's like, it doesn't matter how awesome the horse is, how fast the horse is. The jockey's no good, it's not going to win. And so that was the investing lesson. So if you're talking about like what makes a good investment, I think as long as you invest in the person, even if it fails, it's worth it, because the right person, is going to figure it out. And we have friends of ours who are great operators who have like gone through iterations of companies and come through on the other side.
Right.
And I won't name names to put anyone make anyone blush out there, but we have mutual friends that are like that, and I feel good about those. And so for me, investing really is, it's B school for me. It has been. I've always owned up to this. Is like I
For
don't
sure.
really expect to get an ROI on a lot of my investments. There are areas I'm interested in, people I'm interested in, and I just tend to be a person that likes to learn by putting my own chips in, and I really learn well that way. And so if I can derive the knowledge out, then it's tuition. That's how I look at it. And if I get an exit and some money back, then that's just gravy on top of it.
I think that's fascinating, right? And it reveals a lot of your thinking because you've grown a really successful business with underground printing. You're busy. You mentioned it's hard to run a business. I can attest to that, right? Ask anyone who's run a business. They will tell you it's hard to run a
It's hard.
business. And you're still running the business. And yet you chose to invest that incremental hour of time, not in running the business, but in investing in other businesses. And I think that's really interesting because we all learn so much when you can step outside of
Correct.
running the day-to-day business. So it's always one of the phrases I really like is work on the business, not in the business,
In the business. That's right. That's
because
right.
it's so hard to do that. And I think this speaks volumes about your approach to learning. And maybe that's, again, goes back to your upbringing and who you
Yeah.
are and what defines you. So it's not like, hey, how do I squeeze an extra dollar out? Although that's clearly important, running a business and investor. But it's
Yeah.
how can we learn to make sure we're growing and making things happen for the long term?
100%. I think that once I started, I think I did feel some guilt. Like I wanted to, is interested in other things. And, I wanted to get involved in other things. And I did feel a little bit of guilt. And it was only until like I realized I was really attracted into companies and markets and areas that had some tangential tie-in back, like all the things I like or have tie-in some way. And so they've all really kind of worked together in some manner. They've been able to benefit and aid each other, and I've learned things that from one that have applied to other. Even with the podcast, it's like, all right, learn this over here. This ties in over here. Sponsors this, that, market it. It's on me. I don't feel guilty about it because it's on me, and I think I hold myself accountable to that, to derive the knowledge there to apply in other places, and vice versa. It's like if I just walk through it and look at it just like an investment piece, then that I think is maybe quote unquote selfish. But if I look at it like, all right, what am I going to learn? And so,
Right.
I've actually pulled back from investing a little bit because as I've invested in startups or whatever that actually have grown, the reality is that as a very like the seed round investor is like I lose that connection to the founder pretty quickly unless I
Mm-hmm.
have like a personal connection to them. And then what was the point? Because I'm just going to get diluted down anyway, and rightly so. Like I'm a very small piece of that puzzle, right? And um, so it was just I lost the fun. I'd rather it be small and be close than to be have gotten to Series B or Series C round and be very far from it and still not profitable, still not exited, and who knows, like 10 years later, 5 years, whatever it might be. So I've actually pulled back, and I think I'm more interested in businesses that, well, I know I'm more interested in businesses that don't have aspirations of exiting and don't have aspirations of raising multiple rounds, but have aspirations of raising one round and then existing and turning a profit or whatever. And so those are the ones that I'm really more interested in these days.
That's one of my favorite things about where we are in this climate is that people have come around to valuing profitability.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, obviously
It's not a negative word anymore.
no. I mean, WeWork, Uber, Lyft, Fiverr. I mean, there's a lot of examples out there
Yeah.
of those companies. So it is great to see profitability. Okay. Well, listen, I want to be respectful of your time here, but before I let you go, I'm curious to understand as someone who's been running a business for a while, and obviously there's great benefit for people to get a chance to work in a startup or a high growth, business. What have you seen as the number one characteristic um, that you now seek out when you're hiring new people? So what's the one characteristic that you found to be most valuable?
Um, the number one characteristic I think that I think is the most valuable, but I don't know that I can seek it out because I think it's one of those things that you just don't know right away. But I feel very confident in is it's all about communication. I think all problems go back stem to communication. All success stems from great communication. It all ends up on communication. When things fail, it was lack of communication or broken communication. And when things succeed, it's because you were able to communicate better or faster or more efficiently, tell your story better, whatever it might be. And so lately, I've just been breaking down all problems down to communication, or all successes down to great communication, or poignant communication, whatever it might be. And so I think that those managers, those leaders, those that can tell the story well, communicate well, and look, and that's something that's learned, and it's learned with each new triumph and each new tribulation. Like I don't think it's something like once you've learned to communicate that it sits. Just like all things, it's like, okay, well, now you just
Right.
change. Your audiences change. Generations. There's lots of different ways. That communication just basically needs to revamp and revamp. And you could have been a great communicator 5 years ago and not be one now. And it's like those people that can talk to any audience at any time, at any age. Those are really impressive people, right? So, um, I feel like I've always really admired great orators and great stories. I know this is one of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast on my end, was because I just love, like, that's really a really noble, a really aspirational thing. Like, great graduate commencement speeches. I eat those things up. I love great commencement speeches. Right? They're really inspiring. Um, that's what I loved about President Obama. He was just like such a great speaker, such a, like,
No doubt about it.
motivational when it was all said, as compared to the predecessor, who followed him. So the the reality is that I've always put so much value into that and been so awe-inspired by that. And it's like, yeah, that's just because great communicators really have their way with our minds and our hearts. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is that's not a lesson just for hiring at a company.
No. Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
anywhere. I mean, if you're a good communicator, your relationships are going to be a lot healthier.
Yeah.
And your business, your nonprofit, your community, your school, whatever it is, like, it's going to be more successful. So how the hell can you get better at that? Like, what have you seen people do to
I
improve their
know
communication?
couple of my lessons learned that I've had people I work with that have taught me some hard lessons, given me some hard feedback. Communication is not all about speed. It's not all about getting that out there faster.
Right.
Sometimes you really have to slow down, and wait. Give people time to adapt. Like, there is a cause for that. That actually can get you places faster than trying to just pull everyone along with you. I was very guilty of that, earlier in my career, and maybe till this day, I'm still maybe pushed too fast. So that's an example. Um, I think obviously how you communicate, it's really easy to, like, I tend to be verbose in long-winded in emails, and I think I've been reading a lot about, like, look, it's if you wouldn't say the word out loud, then don't type it. Things like that. It's like, you
It's
don't use
true.
that word in your normal everyday vocabulary. You can't expect people to read it in emails, right? So things like that. I think I really like those lessons and tips, and really try to, like, take them to heart, and how things are broken down in class. I actually take a little bit of time to talk about, like, how to write emails, best ways to sign off, best ways to get your email. I mean, it is marketing, to some degree, but also it's just like, hey, you want a professor to respond back quickly. How would you sign off on that, or how would you word the email? That's communication. Communication is oftentimes about how you write emails these days, as
It's
opposed to how
true.
you write letters or whatever, right? So we talk a lot about tone. I think for a long, I know a lesson early on is we tried to I told people, when they were emailing back and forth or communicating in our system, is like, don't waste time putting thanks or thanks for your help or anything. Like, everyone knows everyone else is thankful. That's one extra email, one extra thing to click on or whatever. Like, that's a waste. That's inefficient. It is true. It probably is inefficient. But you know what? We're humans, and it's nice to be able to say thanks, and it's worth the inefficiency at the end of the day. And so I have completely changed my tune, over the years on that one. And I think it is worth it to follow up with a thanks, or thanks for helping, or this looks great, or whatever, even if it's the only thing in the email, and it just pulls it back up in your inbox, or pulls it back up in your queue, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Still, it's worth it. And that's because that's what makes us go. It's what makes us tick.
Well, I think that's a great final lesson here. Relationships trump efficiency. So
I think relationships are efficient. No, I'm just
there
kidding.
you go. There we go. Well, Rishi, thank you so much for joining us. Where can the good folks of the Muskox herd follow you and listen to your podcast?
My podcast is called Southview Stories. It is potentially pending a name change, but we'll keep the redirect on southviewstories.com. Go there, check it out. And I'm around. Rishi Narayan, feel free to drop me a line. You can reach me at Rishi at undergroundshirts.com. Undergroundshirts.com is where you'll find Underground Printing. There was one thing before we go I had to say. So I'm a muskOx customer, as you know. I have a flannel and a Henley, but I did happen to go back. I was just checking out the site as of recently. Because it was because of your email blast you just sent out a couple of days ago. And I was watching went to a product. I was watching this video, this model, like modeling it in video. It's like, why is that dude so pissed? Like,
He
he's
needs
like,
to
no
smile.
smile on his face, no smile on his face. Oh, that's my friend Brad, the smiliest person I know, who literally didn't smile in the whole thing.
I know. I
So
know.
you should have it. You should
Don't
have a
be
talk with that
angry.
model.
Yes,
You should have a talk with that model. He's got some work to do.
for sure. He's got a lot of work to do. I don't know that he's really cut out for modeling, but he does have the right compensation ask. So we're happy with that, and we hope we can grow together with him. So we'll coach him up, get him to smile
All
a bit.
right, good. His beard is good. I mean, his beard is solid. So that's a start.
Well, thank you so much, Rishi. We really appreciate you
Thanks for having me,
joining us,
Brad.
man. All
I
right.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take
Bye
care.
now.